At the end of last week, political reporters across the state poured through pages of documents as the financial filings for all of the candidates were released. While the headlines were focused primarily on how much money each person has in their campaign war chest, the documents also revealed a common occurrence in New York State. Politicians are able to spend campaign money on pretty much anything without violating election laws. My new guest says that should change. Susan Lerner is the executive director of Common Cause New York. She joins us from New York City with more. Hi, Susan. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Caitlin. Happy to be here.
Very good. Wanted just to speak with you first of all. Last week we saw all of these campaign disclosure forms, a lot of money running through there. What were the things that immediately stuck out for you?
Well, as usual, huge amounts of money pouring through really significant war chests on behalf of incumbents, how difficult it is for challengers to raise money if they qualify at all, and how our campaign finance system is simply broken and out of control.
What do you think are the chief reforms that need to be focused on in this upcoming election and moving forward to make this a more fair process?
Well, there really are a number of things that Common Cause New York and other good government groups have been talking about. First and foremost, we need to lower contribution limits here in New York State. You can contribute an unlimited amount of money to political parties, which is a way around even the very high limits we have on giving to individual candidates. But giving to individual candidates, the contribution limits are very high. $37,800 for statewide candidates in the general election, almost $10,000 in the general election for senatorial candidates. It's really a lot of money. And secondly, frankly, we need another alternative to traditional campaign finance, which is our elected officials spending huge amounts of time chasing large amounts of money, and that's public financing of elections, quite honestly. And then there are a number of smaller fixes. We need to have clear guidance how candidates are allowed to spend campaign contributions. We need to close loopholes that allow corporations to move money to candidates through limited liability corporations and a whole host of other problems. Our disclosures are really not very good. If you try to go through and understand who's contributing to the candidates who want to be your elected representative, it's actually not an easy process because we lack a basic piece of information in our disclosures here in New York State, which is who the employer is of the person. So it's a way in which industries can hide the amount of money they're contributing in order to try and gain access and influence public policy by not having to say who the employer is for the individual contributor, a fact which you have to disclose if you're contributing to somebody running for Congress or somebody running here in New York City for local races. So there's a lot that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, speaking of that federal model, you said someone running for Congress has much stricter limitations on what they can accept or even the disclosure forms. Do you think New York State should be moving toward that model?
Absolutely. I think that one of the problems that people running for office face in this state is a tremendous amount of cynicism. A lot of it comes from the huge amount of money that they collect from special interests and wealthy individuals. And it makes the ordinary voter feel like their voice just isn't important to the candidates. And one of the things which the federal system does is that it does lower the contribution limits to $2,000, which, while it's much more than most ordinary New Yorkers can contribute, is a hell of a lot better than $37,800.
That is certainly a lot of money, and we saw a lot of money running through a number of these campaigns. I'm sure you combed through all of those financial disclosure forms as well. What stuck out to you as inappropriate ways that people are using this campaign cash?
Well, you know, there's so many different expenditures that it's really hard to catalog a particular one as having really stuck out. It runs the gamut. People who are leasing cars, people who take in-kind contributions of being able to fly around on private planes, just all kinds of things which would surprise the ordinary New Yorker.
What do you think when you keep referencing an ordinary New Yorker? When an ordinary New Yorker is giving a candidate money, what do you think they expect it to be used for?
I think they expect it to be used by the candidate to actually campaign and communicate with the voters. But here in New York, there are absolutely no limits. In fact, a Board of Elections official in the past has said that the only thing that could really be considered illegal in New York State is if the candidate took the campaign money and put it in his pocket and walked out the door. Short of that, virtually anything is allowable if the candidate can come up with some explanation for why it's related to campaigning. And if you have no guidance whatsoever, creative people can always come up with an explanation for why something that really doesn't seem to the ordinary person to be related to the campaign at all actually is. And that's what we see in New York, a lot of really creative explanations for how the money is spent.
So you're certainly calling for big reforms here in New York State. What do you think would have to be done to put those reforms into action? And then further, what about the reform bills that have already been introduced in the legislature? Do you agree with those, or do you think they need to go further?
Well, I think that they're good starts. We haven't seen any bill that really is strong enough and goes the full way towards a complete reform of our campaign finance system. We haven't seen a really strong public financing of elections bill this particular legislative session. We have recently seen a good start on campaign finance reform that has a strengthened enforcement provision in it, but not anything that is really the full soup to nuts, top to bottom, tightening and clarification and lowering of limits that we need to see here in New York State.
So did you agree with the governor then when he vetoed the legislature's package, saying that it needed to go further? Do you agree there?
Yes, indeed. Common Cause New York was the good government group which called on the governor to veto that bill because we felt that it just was not enough. And we were afraid that the very weak reforms that we saw in that bill would be the only reforms we would see for a number of years. And we felt they just were not strong enough. We think that the legislature needs to do better. And we are hopeful that next year, with a new governor and a new legislature, that they'll listen to the people's concerns, because frankly, we hear from a lot of people that they are disgusted. And frankly, I think our elected officials and the candidates are hearing from ordinary people and voters as well. We hear stories of elected officials who go into the dry cleaners, and when they say they're a politician, people don't want to talk to them. It's considered not an attractive profession anymore, and a lot of it is because of this kind of corner cutting and stretching of the rules. It's got to stop. And people need to feel confident that their elected officials work first and foremost for them. And our system is set up to really cause people to be skeptical about that. And I think it's a systemic problem, and I think it's one that we, the voters, have to demand be changed, because it's a system that's working very well for elected officials. So the change has got to come from the people. We've got to demand it. We've got to make it clear to people running for office, running for re-election, that we really are not going to accept a pallid imitation of reform. We expect real reform, or else, frankly, the ballot box is the ultimate solution.
Well, there certainly are a number of signs that point to dysfunction in Albany. Do you think there's any quick fixes, anything that could be done right away before Election Day to change this?
Well, you know, it's difficult when the legislature is not in session. We don't know what's going to happen if the Senate's going to come back. If the Senate were to pass something truly revolutionary, then the Assembly isn't there to move it forward into law. So I think it's very difficult to see what's going to change. But I think that the candidates themselves have got to convince the voters. I think there are things that individual candidates can do. I think that they can put limits on money that they're accepting from certain areas of contributors. I think that they themselves can agree not to accept certain kind of money, and they themselves can agree that they will not spend money for things that really are not campaign related.
Certainly a high call to elected officials there. Susan Lerner, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.